Her velvety bouquets amplified the Dutch still life and sold for twice as much as Rembrandt ever earned. Rachel Ruysch, or Rachel Rouse as she would have been known in her native Holland, was the so-called subtle art heroine of the Baroque-era Netherlands, but her accomplishments were monumental. As one of the most in-demand painters of her day, she's considered the best documented woman artist to come out of the Dutch Golden Age, and she managed it all while having 10 children. Now that's flower power. And this is Several Circles. Silken flora practically burst beyond the canvas, like totems of life in its peak glory. But closer inspection reveals instead a celebration of the life cycle, comprising imperfections and unpleasantries like entropy and death. There's nothing overtly mournful about Rachel Ruysch's paintings. Rather, each decaying petal and withering leaf is rendered with a simultaneously loving and analytical eye. A byproduct of her upbringing in a family of scholarly artists. Born in 1664 in The Hague and raised in Amsterdam, her maternal grandfather was the architect Peter Post, who co-designed the Mauritshuis Museum in The Hague, amongst many other important Dutch Baroque buildings. Her great-uncle, Frans Post, was the first European to paint and sketch the South American landscape in a region of Brazil that was briefly colonized by the Dutch, and her father Frederick was a thoroughly eccentric scientist. Frederick Ruysch was a significant figure in the fields of botany and anatomy, a collector and preserver of biological specimens, and the creator of renowned dioramas in which he posed skeletons amid environments of assorted body parts. Frederick's exhibitions were integral to medical research, but they were so artfully designed that they extended into the realm of the vanitas, a still life of the cautionary variety that pairs the fleeting indulgences of life with icons of death, or memento mori, which is Latin for remember you must die, a prevailing European philosophy and surely something of a personal motto for Frederick, whose primary medium was, after all, the cadaver. Frederick created such wild spectacles that he opened a popular museum in Amsterdam, offering the morbidly curious public rare insight into the inner workings of the body. Having inherited her father's inquisitive mind and apparently iron stomach, the young Rachel helped Frederick prepare his displays by sewing lace accoutrements and ideating ways to gussy up the specimens. Later on, she taught Frederick how to draw so that he could publish and circulate illustrations of his various findings. It stands to reason that Frederick was likewise fascinated by the work of Otto Marcius van Schreek, who innovated the sottobosco subgenre of still life paintings. Translating to undergrowth in Italian, the sottobosco still life was a revelatory examination of the flora and fauna that inhabit the forest floor, a mysterious and, in van Schreek's day, largely unobserved ecosystem. Like Frederick, van Schreek worked at the four-way intersection of art and science, the beautiful and the grotesque, and he amassed a menagerie of reptiles and insects that Frederick was quick to pick through upon the artist's death in 1678. He also acquired several of van Schreek's paintings, which Rachel avidly scrutinized. She was primed to become a leading painter of the natural world. She had privileged access to live plants at the local botanical garden where Frederick held a high post, as well as the flora in his famed collection. Frederick encouraged his daughter's artistic pursuits, and at the age of 15, she began her training with the Amsterdam-based painter Willem van Aalst, thereby formally immersing herself in the strange, stunning, and surprisingly complex world of the still life. With regional origins in the early 1600s, the still life trend predated Ruysch by several decades. It was well suited to its time. It mediated art's purpose as a pretty picture, a demonstration of the artist's technical chops, and a moralistic sermon. Sumptuous feasts and lush floral arrangements served as tokens of vitality and abundance, resplendent on the surface, but laced with sobering undertones. Perishable items like fruits and flowers were ideal representatives of change, the passage of time, and death's imminent approach. Flowers were traditionally relegated to the margins, but as the 17th century progressed, they accrued extraordinary financial and social capital, and the budding still life genre planted them firmly in the spotlight. It was a trend accelerated by a phenomenon known as tulip mania, the result of vigorous trading with new colonies and distant empires. The all-powerful Dutch East India Company, a government-sanctioned megacorporation founded in 1602, yielded immeasurable wealth and an influx of exotic imports, from Indian spices to tobacco from the New World. But it seems that nothing was more intoxicating than the arrival of the tulip, a flower native to the far-flung valleys of Central Asia. Legend has it that a frantic free-for-all ensued in the 1630s as the young, old, rich, and poor scrambled to invest in precious tulip bulbs, which bloomed for but one sublime week, their short-lived splendor only adding to their appeal. Most coveted of all was the striped tulip, but those exquisite flicks of color came at a cost as the product of a virus. These sickly tulips were less likely to flourish, all the better for their value when they did. So the story goes that the Netherlands went mad with desperation to buy and upsell tulips until they were so prohibitively expensive that the sellers outnumbered the buyers and the bubble burst in 1637, leaving the Dutch economy in ruins. It turns out that tulip mania probably wasn't that hysterical, but it did happen to a lesser extent, and the flower became a potent emblem of social status and the pitfalls of unchecked materialism. Enter Ruysch, who would nurture the floral still life into full bloom. Under Van Alst's tutelage, she mastered the art of perspective, texture, and luminosity until her paintings became faintly multi-sensory, buzzing, tactile, and sweet-scented. Like Van Alst and Van Schreek, Ruysch implemented earthy techniques such as applying paint with moss and butterfly wings to achieve a more precise effect, and she balanced that precision with whimsical creative liberties. She united species from different ecosystems that realistically thrive at different times, and hid tiny Sotobosco creatures throughout the composition so that we can study her paintings repeatedly and at length and discover new treasures. Dramatic, elegant, and almost animated, Ruysch's still lifes were exceptional, and eager patrons clamored to own one. They regularly sold for over 1,000 guilders. To put that in perspective, Rembrandt's paintings rarely exceeded 500. Ruysch was already a force to be reckoned with when she married the painter Jan Poel at the age of 29 in 1693. Together, the couple had a sizable family of 10 children, the last of whom was born when Ruysch was 47. A sweet portrait made by Poel in 1716 indicates that he recognized his wife's genius. He places himself behind her as she sits coolly between her easel and one of her famed bouquets. Of course, it wasn't unheard of for women to become artists. Ruysch was in good company with the likes of her predecessors, Clara Peters and Judith Leister, and talented contemporaries such as Maria van Oosterwijk and even her own sister, Anna. But the way Ruysch negotiated the demands of such a large family and an active career is certainly commendable, even with the likelihood that as a woman of means, she probably had help. In 1701, she joined an esteemed painters' guild in The Hague where she and Poel lived, and she became the first woman admitted to the Confrérie Pictura, another local artists' society. In 1708, both Ruysch and Poel were hired as court painters to Johann Wilhelm II of Bavaria. It was customary for artists to relocate for their patrons, and some accounts suggest that they lived and worked in Dusseldorf until the prince died in 1716. Others posit that he was so fond of Ruysch that he allowed her and her family to remain in the Netherlands. Circa 1716, she and Poel moved to Amsterdam. Ruysch's canvases were so valuable at this point that she didn't have to sell more than a few of them annually, and money was no object for Ruysch after 1722, when she, Poel, and their son George invested 10 guilders in a winning lottery ticket worth 75,000. George was entitled to half of the money, but he tragically died 3 years later in his early 20s. The money, however, allowed Ruysch to paint at her leisure for the rest of her long life. What's thought to be her final work bears not only her signature and the date, but her age, which she proudly immortalized at 83. She died 3 years later in 1750. Ruysch has fallen into a degree of obscurity with time, eclipsed by the very artists whose work she outsold. The still life has evolved remarkably through the centuries, from Ruysch's more immediate successors to its many modern iterations and contemporary visions on and off the canvas. And in this period of intensified domesticity, the still life is experiencing a fashionable renaissance. It seems Ruysch's legacy is ripe to blossom again. Thanks for watching Several Circles. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos about the lives and work of extraordinary artists from across history and the present day. And let us know in the comments if there's an artist you'd like to know more about.